The topic or the title for my sermon today is Godly Risk-Taking. Godly risk-taking. Is that an oxymoron? Is that self-contradictory? Godly risk-taking. How can we be godly and take risks? I would like to venture to suggest to you that risk-taking in the Bible at times seems to be encouraged. And many of the heroes that we talked about a couple of weeks ago were indeed risk-takers. In fact, I would go further and say that no great invention, no great cure of disease or great global triumph has ever been achieved without risk-taking. So a little bit of rumination now on risk-taking behaviour. And some of you will be squirming in your seats already. Where's he going with this? It seems that we are all different. That's a fairly obvious statement, isn't it? But particularly when it comes to risky behaviour. Some of us are naturally more risk takers. Others of us are more cautious about life and rarely take a risk. No one's sure whether these are learned traits or whether it's genetic. It's probably a combination of both, nurture or nature, that makes us a risk taker, naturally or not. Those of you who know me well will not be surprised to discover that I have been a bit of a risk taker all my life, as far back as I can remember, climbing over Mr. Bracey's stone fence in Whangarei when I was 5 years old to steal one of his fantastic plums off his beautiful plum tree. Unfortunately for me, it was green because I couldn't wait for it to ripen. And boy, was I crook behind the chook shed later in that day. Be sure your sins will find you out, some of you will be saying. On the other hand, I have a brother. A goody two-shoes brother. Some of you know him. He's 4 years older than me. And he was not a risk taker. And he still isn't. He's far more measured and deliberate and considered in all he does. As teenagers, I drove fast, noisy motorbikes without a helmet, because in those days you didn't have to wear a helmet. And he drove a conservative Simca that couldn't pull the skin off a rice pudding. But it was reliable, and he always put his seatbelt on. I went to parties in my teenage years and even gate crashed a few, got kicked out of one by Kath Tizard in Glendowie. She's fairly formidable, and she has a vocabulary that I've never heard before. Some of you know what I'm talking about. But my brother never went to parties. After my conversion to Christ at the age of 18, I went to Bible college, penniless. For those of you in the modern age, that means I didn't have a cent to my name. And the elders of my church did a lot of tutting. My brother took a government studentship to become a teacher. We used to pay young people to go to university, pay all their fees and give them a bursary. And he did that and he got a job, and within 3 years he had his own house. He waited until he was 40 before he found the right bride and got married to a local Kiwi girl. I got married at 22 and married an Australian. Very risky. Yes, I know most of you will be thinking it was a bigger risk for Dot to marry this crazy Kiwi guy who had no job, no money, no degrees, and a passion for fast motorbikes. We can probably all put ourselves on a continuum. I found this on Google Images, the risk attitude spectrum. Going from risk averse, that means you don't like risks at all, to risk tolerant, to risk seeking. I wonder if I could try this out now. Think about where you are, okay? Okay, we're going to start down the bottom. Watch my hand and I'm going to go up. So put your hand up where you think you are. Oh, there's a few of us up there. That was good. Sorry, I didn't see over here. You want to do that again? Come on.
I want the chance.
Which one, though?
Take your pick.
I think I know. All right. All right. Going back to my provocative point at the beginning, I want to assert that there are some great examples in the Bible of godly risk-takers. And the first one may surprise you. The first one is God himself. God took a huge risk in creating human beings and giving them free will, free choice, to love him or not. So right there at the beginning in creation, we have the example of the Creator that I would argue took a great risk in doing that. But the ones that you're probably expecting me to list here include Noah. Imagine Noah. What you up to, Noah? Making a boat? We're 1,000 kilometres from the sea. What are you making a boat? It hasn't rained for 6 months. He would have been mocked. How about Abraham? Abraham and Sarah. He was Abram, first of all, before he got the hand. Imagine, where are you going, Abe? You've had such a successful business here in Ur, and you're uprooting and heading out with no means to a land you don't know about. You crazy man, crazy. And people would have said to Sarah later on, "You're going to keep that baby? You're older than my grandmother. You crazy old lady." And Esther. This didn't really work out, did it, Abraham? We touched on the story of Esther as one of our heroes. A woman from a minority group, prepared to put everything on the line as a Jewish woman in a foreign land, to risk her very life to stand up and confront the king of Persia, Xerxes, who had threatened to do bad things to her people. And then, of course, we come to our Old Testament reading, and I wanted you to hear most of the story. Nebuchadnezzar requiring them to bow down to his God and to the golden idol. And we know what happened next. Many a sermon has been written on that passage. And there's a lot of debate. Remember, the king recognises that there aren't just 3 figures in the fire, but 4. And there's a lot of debate about who's the 4th and what does that mean. But that's not for us today. What are the features of their risk-taking? Maybe things we can learn from. They resisted the pressure to conform. It would have been easy for them just to do what they were told. But they would not, because they stood firm on their own beliefs, their own important commitments. And they trusted God. It's all very well for us to have beliefs, but we're not trusting until we put those beliefs into action, right? They are great examples of godly risk takers. And they said, we believe our God will protect and deliver us, but even if we get roasted and die, we are prepared for that. Now that's interesting, isn't it? They trusted God, but they didn't know what the outcome would be in terms of their own safety. That's an interesting observation. And then we come to the New Testament, and of course, Jesus is probably the biggest risk taker of them all. And the easy fob off for us to say, well, you can't use Jesus because he was the Messiah, he was the Son of God, and we aren't, unless we have a Messiah complex. But then there was Paul, wasn't there? Just think about Jesus. There are so many situations. This one where Peter took him aside and really wanted to de-risk him and said, don't do that, you might get hurt. And it was probably the biggest reaction from Jesus to anyone negatively was when Jesus said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. Whoa. Probably his number one disciple. That's harsh, isn't it? It's harsh because he stood in the way of Jesus accomplishing the task that he had been given. And then we have another situation here in John 10, and it probably happened on a number of occasions, where the scribes and Pharisees confronted Jesus, were so upset with what they considered to be blasphemy that they took up rocks in order to execute him on the spot. And there were several occasions like that, and he was able to walk through them and past them. And we come to Apostle Paul, and I haven't listed all of his, but you know most of them. He risks his life over and over again, and he is just a mortal man like you or I. Very similar to Jesus, he goes to Jerusalem, to the Jewish council, and they were the ones who really had it into him. They were the ones that had the Romans arrest him. He gets arrested several times, he gets flogged several times, and eventually it's not a happy story because he gets executed by the Romans. And he was one of our early martyrs, the Apostle Paul. Risk-taking is all the way through Scripture. And why, therefore, do we not think about being bold and courageous in some of our decision-making? Particularly if we are risk-averse. A risk-taker being a godly risk-taker does not mean living a carefree and reckless life. Rather, it means to be willing to step out of the ordinary and the safe often. And as we reflect on what the challenge of these risk takers are to us from the Bible, there are two levels that we need to think about. One is a personal level. The first thing I want to say is don't be an idiot. Don't be a pain in the neck to other people. Check out with others that you respect what your risky plan might be or your risky decision might be. Is it a godly one? Is it just crazy? And seek out wise advisors, people you can trust, people that you deeply respect. So that's the cautionary one. But you know, as Christians, we should have the edge on other people who are not walking a life with God in it, with God's Spirit in our lives. We should have the edge, and we should be confident, not overconfident, if we trust that God has our best interests as well as His plans for our life. We should have the edge. Having God in our life makes a huge difference. And there's been some outstanding people in our country, and I won't name them, but because of that edge, they have made a transformational difference to this nation. The third thing I want to say on the personal level, the way of Christ surely is our standard, and we come back to this, and this is the year that I've been saying this over and over again. What would Jesus do? If He was in my situation, and I'm looking at a number of you who are about to make big decisions about your future, what would He do? He does understand, even though we think of Him back 2,000 years ago. What would Jesus do? And as a church, we're going to come to that now, we need to keep asking that question. In this situation, what would Jesus be urging us to do? And the last point I want to say at the personal level, just come on, have some guts. Have some guts to stand alone, to go against the tide, maybe to do something slightly radical for Him. Be strong and very courageous, words from Joshua chapter 1, as he faced the challenge of going to a new place, a new job. Be strong and very courageous, for God goes with you. St Andrew's Church and community. Let me make some general comments. I'm nearly finished. I venture, and this is controversial, so particularly if you've been a Presbyterian a long time, strap yourself into the pew. I venture to suggest that we Protestant mainline Christian churches are by and large risk averse. It's almost written into our Presbyterian way of doing things, committee after committee after subcommittee after committee, even making a decision like, demolishing a church, calling a minister, building a new church, changing from a structure of session and managers like we've got to a church council. There is this elaborate process you go through so you don't make a mistake or a poor decision. And hovering over all of this is presbytery, just in case you've missed something. They basically have the sign-off for anything significant that happens in a Presbyterian parish. That's how it works, folks. Some of you won't know about that. Very, very democratic, flat structure. Everyone is involved, everyone gets a say in a vote, but very risk averse and very slow to make any kind of progress. You know, many churches have walked right up to the edge of something new, some new calling, some new exciting outreach, but the non-risk takers have killed it. This mindset is murderous to any church. So many churches are dying through lack of courage and trust in a providing God. Did you know the Auckland Presbytery is incredibly wealthy now? Do you know why they're so wealthy? Because they're selling churches that aren't used anymore, that are empty. And of course, the Auckland property market's still pretty good. And so we're accumulating millions in our bank as the church dies. I hope that doesn't happen to this church.